This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Telly Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Reverberations from South Korea's martial law backflip. Prosecutors probing the interior minister. The former defense minister barred from leaving the country, and the president facing impeachment under police investigation. But president, for how much longer? Pressure is mounting on Yoon Suk Yeol to resign, with the country's largest labor union calling for an indefinite strike until the president steps down. We will be live at one of those rallies. And the political uncertainty continuing to unnerve investors. Stocks in Seoul slipping for a second straight session, and while the won is back under pressure. And Hong Kong leader John Lee, in a surprise reshuffle, replaces the city's tourism and transport ministers while stressing the need for new ideas for the two sectors. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, UNESCO recognizes Japan's centuries-old tradition of making sake as an intangible cultural heritage. Brewers are predicting a sales boost abroad and hopeful of reigniting interest at home. President Yoon Suk Yeol's political fate is yet to be determined, but so far it seems grim, with the opposition-led National Assembly calling his decision to impose martial law an act of treason. The Democratic Party's leader said that his party would vote on a bill to impeach Mr. Yoon on Saturday evening. Well, this puts the opposition at loggerheads with lawmakers from the president's party. Even though they reject him and his martial law decree, the ruling party has decided to unite to block his impeachment bill, claiming it could cause further chaos. The opposition needs 8 lawmakers from the ruling party to cross the floor to secure majority. If the motion passes, President Yoon will be immediately stripped of his powers, paving the way for a trial. In the meantime, former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun has been barred from leaving the country, pending an investigation into his role in the imposition of martial law. He has been replaced by the ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Choi Byung-hook. Mr. Kim was reportedly the one who recommended imposing martial law, believing that the liberal opposition had pushed President Yoon to the edge. Well, Yoon's short-lived martial law was the first South Korea has seen since democracy was restored in the 1980s. And it also came after months of tension with his rivals in parliament. Well, away from the echelons of power, there are protests on the streets also calling for the resignation of the president. The protesters have been braving the rain to continue their march. Last night, as many as 10,000 people marched towards the presidential palace until they were blocked by police. The rally was organized by KCTU, which is the country's largest labor union group, which is vowing an indefinite strike.
윤석열의 계엄령 선포 이후로 민주사회가 많이 퇴진되었다고 생각하고 민주사회가 다시 회복되기를 바라는 마음으로 이 자리에 왔습니다.
Rallies are also taking place at the National Assembly, where lawmakers from both the ruling and opposition sides have been voicing their demands. And for more, CNA's Lim Yoon-suk joins us from the National Assembly. Yoon-suk, what exactly is the latest on the rallies being held at the National Assembly where you are? Both parties apparently demanding different things. So what are they saying exactly?
Well, yes, they are, and I am inside the National Assembly here in South Korea. Now, if you can see behind me, those are the steps leading to inside the National Assembly, but right now it's just filled with lawmakers and supporters of the opposition groups here, all gathered here trying to give each other support, and also, just different chants that I've been hearing for the last 2 hours. And most of them were about to impeach President Yoon Suk Yeol, to arrest President Yoon Suk Yeol, and also that he needs to resign. Now, remember, this is the National Assembly, where a few days ago when that martial law was imposed, you had soldiers on the grounds of this National Assembly trying to block the lawmakers from entering so that they could cast the votes against the martial law. But, earlier here, while I was here, as you can hear now, it's just really a gathering of people giving different kinds of speeches, people coming out here on stage, talking about how they felt when they saw the president come on air, live televised, declaring martial law here in South Korea. And also earlier, there were just songs being sung by different people. And it was really a lot of the songs that a lot of Koreans heard, and even I myself heard in the 1980s here in South Korea, when, South Korea was actually under martial law in 1979 and 1980s. And in fact, one of them was telling me that he had no idea that he would be listening to these songs again and really listening to the lyrics of the songs because they truly feel that democracy here in South Korea was crushed when President Yoon Suk Yeol imposed that martial law. And that's why they are here today saying that he cannot be allowed to destroy the democracy that South Koreans right now cherish and have just because one president, President Yoon Suk Yeol wanted it for his own political purposes. Now, this rally started yesterday when the main opposition Democratic Party passed that motion for the impeachment of President Yoon Suk Yeol. And according to them, they will be here every night. And as we heard, as you just said, that on Saturday is when the opposition parties will be going in to cast their votes to impeach President Yoon Suk Yeol. But right now, the big question is whether the ruling party will be giving them those votes. Now, the chairman of the ruling party, Han Dong-hoon, has said no. He has said that they will not be supporting the impeachment bill, though he does say that President Yoon Suk Yeol needs to give an explanation, an apology to the nation for what happened. And he has called on President Yoon to leave the ruling party, but there's been no talk from the ruling party of him being impeached or wanting him to resign from the presidential office.
That's correct. That's correct. So we're all still awaiting President Yoon to speak to the public. I also believe, Yoon Suk, that an emergency session of a parliamentary defense committee was held earlier today. What were some of the key takeaways?
Well, yes, that happened inside the National Assembly today. And really, this was an emergency defense committee that really lasted for the whole day. Now, the Vice Defense Minister Kim Sun-ho and the Army Chief of Staff Park An-soo were both called in to answer questions from both the ruling and the opposition lawmakers. Now remember, Park An-soo was the person who briefly held the title of the martial law commander on the day that President Yoon imposed that martial law. So both of them were inside there for hours being grilled by lawmakers. And what struck me, while listening to both of them answer those questions, was that both of them had no idea that President Yoon Suk Yeol was going to be imposing martial law here in South Korea. They too also found out, like the rest of all the Koreans, like me too, through the television live telecast that President Yoon did when he announced that South Korea was going to be under martial law. As soon as they heard that, they went to the National Defense Ministry, to the bunker there, and it was there that they heard a bit of the details of what was going to happen. And it was there that the Army Chief of Staff, Park An-soo, was given the order to become the martial law commander. And that is when the troops were sent here. About more than 200 troops were sent to the National Assembly. Helicopters were sent here too because they wanted to prevent the lawmakers from passing from overturning the martial law. And so listening to both of them talk about this, all of them did say that the orders came from the defense minister, the former defense minister, Kim Yong-hyun, who was supposed to be here for that hearing, but because he resigned and the President Yoon Suk Yeol accepted resignation, he didn't have to be in there today. But according to everything that came out there today, inside the National Assembly, it seemed like it was the defense minister, the former defense minister, Kim Yong-hyun, who gave all the orders, who said that, they had to do what they had to do. And in fact, the Army Chief of Staff, Park Han-soo, the martial commander, was saying that even the decree with the 6 points that stated that there will be no political activities allowed, including those of lawmakers inside the National Assembly, That 6-point decree was given to him by the defense minister, and he had no say as to whether this was legal or not. And in fact, he did say that he asked if this had to go through a legal review, and he was told that it was fine and just to go ahead with the orders. And so, listening to that for hours, and I'm sure Koreans, and they were talking about it there too. It just feels like everything was given by the defense minister, former defense minister Kim Yong-hun, to those military commanders, and the other people really had no idea what was going on, except for President Yoon Suk Yeol and a few of his people, including the defense minister, who right now, because the main opposition feels that he could flee the country, travel ban has been imposed on him. But also one interesting point I do want to say is that many of the lawmakers from the opposition parties are still staying inside there. And some of them have been inside the National Assembly and haven't left since all this happened because they're afraid that President Yoon Suk Yeol could again impose martial law here. And they want to make sure that they are inside to be able to overturn that should that happen, because everyone here and the lawmakers have been telling me that democracy was fought very hard for by South Koreans, and they want to make sure that democracy exists and lasts here in South Korea.
Well, no doubt still lots of political chaos and confusion in South Korea. But thanks very much for reporting to us, CNA's Lim Yun-suk live from Seoul. Now, South Korea's prompt crisis response has managed to cushion the impact of political tumult on markets, but the investor sentiment remains fragile. And Roland Lim is standing by for more. So, Roland, Seoul stocks, right? That slipped for a second consecutive session today. Is that right?
Right, you are. The benchmark Kospi index fell nearly 1% today. The Korean won weakened. Economists saying rapid action by officials have limited the damage, but only for now. And to find out how the markets will be reacting to the next few days and beyond, Crystal Tan, economist at ANZ, joins us live. Crystal, very good to have you this evening. The political turmoil in South Korea really is a stress test for its democracy, but is it also a stress test for its financial markets? I remember in the 2016-17 impeachment of ex-President Park Geun-hye, the benchmark Kospi did experience some volatility.
Yes, I mean, the market reaction to the current episode has also been pretty swift, but contained, right? So various South Korean assets like currency, equities, these are now weaker than they were before the martial law episode. And, with political uncertainty still heightened, it's certainly hard to rule out further weakness in the near term. But, the policy responses so far has been pretty swift. They have helped minimize volatility. They have provided sufficient liquidity, and that's been very helpful in terms of limiting the downside.
So, Crystal, you did mention that officials did react quickly to reassure investors. So would you say this is more of a growth shock than a sovereign risk?
Yeah, so from an economic point of view, the risks to growth have certainly are to the downside, right? This whole episode was an unexpected shock. It's created basically a spike in both political and economic uncertainty that's clouding business prospects, that's hurting consumer sentiment. But at the same time, it's still too early to gauge the fallout. I think the swift reversal of the martial law and also the quick reaction from policymakers, they do offer some comfort, right? So next to watch would be the presidential impeachment vote, that's scheduled on 7th December. It's unclear how the vote will unfold at this stage, but ultimately a faster political resolution is going to help minimize potential economic damage. And other events that we're watching also would include a series of planned strikes and also the extent of mass demonstrations and how they could potentially disrupt economic activity.
This scandal comes at a tough time for South Korea. Cyclical slowdown for its exports, external shocks such as geopolitics, greater competition from China, and not to mention the uncertainty regarding the US Inflation Reduction Act under incoming President Donald Trump. What's your assessment on prospects in South Korea?
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation, right? You have, potentially tougher US policies on the horizon, and then you have to navigate a domestic political crisis at the same time. The thing is, South Korea is a very export-oriented economy, right? The US is a major export market for them. And, South Korea has been a beneficiary of the Biden administration's industrial policies, including the Inflation Reduction Act that you mentioned. So, if the US policy regime turns tougher and less favorable for South Korea, that's going to be a major economic headwind. So, the first priority really now has to be to stabilize the domestic situation. You need to restore confidence in the leadership because that's going to be crucial to decisive and effective policy making. We need quick passage of important policy bills. You need implementation of economic measures that will help the economy withstand these incoming headwinds.
Crystal, meantime, the markets, they're also factoring another 50 basis points cut in benchmark interest rates from the current level of 3%. I'm curious to know what is your house view for next year?
Well, 3% is still considered pretty restrictive in terms of monetary policy settings. We think 2.5 is the neutral rate. So that's our current house view. But the balance of risk, given what's happening with the political situation, given what's happening in terms of growth headwinds, the balance of risk is that we could see more than 50 basis points next year.
Well, given the uncertainties ahead, how do you think a caretaker government or even a new administration will actually impact economic policies and its growth drivers?
Well, it's tricky because when you're a caretaker government, you tend to the priority is policy continuity. It's about stabilizing the economy. You don't have much leeway in terms of new major policy initiatives or measures. So in terms of creating new growth drivers, they're going to be very limited in terms of what they can do.
Also, there's always been a so-called Korean discount to Korean stocks compared to global peers, maybe because of tensions with the North and its OPEC conglomerates. Is this discount likely to widen further?
I mean, this situation certainly is not helpful. As you mentioned, the Korean discount, where Korean assets tend to underperform. It's mainly due to a few factors. One, of course, is North Korea and geopolitical tensions. And the other is because of the large chaebols in South Korea's economy. They don't tend to pay very generous dividends, for example. And now if you have political uncertainty on top of that mix, that's only going to increase the risk premium.
Crystal, appreciate those market insights. That was Crystal Tan, economist at ANZ, speaking to us live from Singapore. And I'll be back with business news a little bit later on. We'll tell you. For now, it's back to you.
Plenty to unpack. We look forward to speaking with you again, Roland. Now, for more insights into the implications of the short-lived martial law, we will be speaking with Aidan Foster Carter from Leeds University a little later this hour on East Asia Tonight. And coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Chinese shopping app Temu forced to suspend its services in Vietnam after it failed to register with authorities. Plus, Hong Kong-listed property manager ESR Group gets a $7 billion offer from a consortium to take it private. Hello again. We are back from the break and super energized. Roland Lim, in fact, is standing by with more business news.
We are tracking Bitcoin's dramatic rally. The popular cryptocurrency burst past $100,000 for the first time today. Now, the crypto industry cheering US President-elect Donald Trump's nominee to run the Securities and Exchange Commission, finally shattering the historic level. Now, the digital currency is now up more than 140% since the start of the year, 48% since the US presidential election last month. The optimism has been fueled by the selection of Paul Atkins to the helm of the SEC. Mr. Atkins is a former SEC commissioner who has been involved in crypto policy as co-chair of the Token Alliance. His consultancy firm also advises crypto companies on how to maintain government compliance and to manage risk. A current SEC chair, Gary Gensler, has been cracking down on digital assets since a 2022 market rout exposed fraudulent practices in the sector. Now, crypto markets have roughly gained about $1.4 trillion since Mr. Trump's election victory in November. Now, earlier we spoke with Zenon Capron. He is fintech expert and author of Chomping at the Bitcoin. Now, he told us how the incoming Trump administration could impact investors' activity in the cryptocurrency space.
A more nuanced approach to Bitcoin is probably appropriate. I think one of the challenges that the industry had with Gensler is that he was just unclear as to whether cryptocurrencies in general and Bitcoin should be allowed and how they should be treated. Paul Atkins and the new Trump administration have at least talked quite a bit about what they would do with cryptocurrency going forward, and it looks quite positive. The thing to keep in mind is that even Gensler was positive before he came into office as well about cryptocurrency, and that changed once he moved into the role. So it still remains to be seen Atkins's position on this, and Trump as well, obviously. Within Bitcoin over the past week, we've seen record inflows into some of these ETFs. And then with other ETFs representing Ethereum and other digital assets coming into play, we'll continue to see flows into that as institutional investors and high net worth individuals expand cryptocurrencies as part of their portfolios. And the average everyday retail investor gets access to it through ETFs or just buying directly from cryptocurrency exchanges. It will be part of a portfolio. Will it ever overtake some traditional investments like some of the equity investment? Probably not. But I think historically over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of companies on one end, MicroStrategy, which has put a lot of money into Bitcoin, but just in general, companies have invested in Bitcoin or considered it. Microsoft in a couple of days will make a decision if they're going to be investing in it. So I think, institutional investors and high net worth individuals for many years have been investing in cryptocurrencies. But now I think more mainstream investors, retail investors, or institutions that hadn't considered it in the past will consider it as part of a larger investment portfolio, just because the returns have been traditionally too good to ignore.
A Chinese online retailer Temu has been told to indefinitely suspend its operations in Vietnam. And that's after it failed to meet an end November deadline for business registration in the Southeast Asian country. State media reports goods ordered on Temu are no longer being cleared through customs in Vietnam. The announcement comes after the Trade Ministry raised concerns back in October over the stunningly low prices on the online marketplace, as well as their impact on Vietnamese producers. Temu has sucked in consumers from across the world with its low prices and all-powerful algorithms. Since it began operations in Vietnam in October, it has caught the eye of Vietnamese consumers with discounts of up to 90% and free shipping. Now, Temu is also one of the fastest-growing apps in Europe. But the trade bloc has hit the shopping platform with a probe over concerns that the site is doing too little to stop the sale of illegal products. Regulators in South Korea have also opened an investigation into Temu on suspicion of unfair practices, including false advertising and poor product quality. Separately, online fashion retailer Shein says the Vietnamese version of its website is temporarily unavailable. It adds it is working with the Trade Ministry to register its e-commerce services. Shein is founded in China but is now headquartered in Singapore. It faces the same deadline as Temu to register. Hong Kong-listed property manager ESR Group has received a $7 billion takeover offer from a consortium of US-based investment firms. If successful, it'll be the largest privatization from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange since 2021. Shares of the warehouse operator soared as much as 6.6% before paring down to 3.5% after resuming trade, its biggest intraday gain since May. Now, the buyout group is seeking to acquire all ESR shares for $167 each and to take the company private. Now, that represents a nearly 56% premium to its share price in April, when investors submitted its first non-binding offer. It adds that the proposal has received the support of majority stakeholders. ESR has about $154 billion in assets under management, including data centers and logistic properties in countries across the Asia-Pacific. The offer comes at a time when the company has been hurt by underperforming markets in China and in Hong Kong, amid geopolitical tensions and concerns about economic growth. It has also faced a slowdown in the property sector in China, once its biggest market, this as Beijing sought to rein in high debt levels. The group says ESR is in need of a strategic transformation that would involve transitioning to a light asset platform. And you're up to date with the business news. Sally.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, time now for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, we circle back to our top story. South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol faces impeachment and investigations after he imposed a short-lived martial law. And for more insights on the repercussions of this shock move, we'll be speaking to an expert in a moment. South Korean police investigate President Yoon Suk Yeol for a potential treason over his martial law declaration. The Interior Minister and former Defense Minister are also reportedly under probe. Meantime, protesters have gathered across South Korea for the second consecutive day, calling for Yoon Suk Yeol to step down. One of the largest umbrella labor unions in the country, Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, along with other groups, are holding a gathering in Seoul. And Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee has fired 2 members of his cabinet. Getting the axe are Transport and Logistics Secretary Lam Sai-hung and Culture, Sports and Tourism Secretary Kevin Yung. Circling back to our top story, criticism mounting over South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol's botched attempt to impose martial law. Mr. Yoon has been asked to leave his own party. Well, People Power Party leader Han Dok-hoon said that he demanded the president to do so. He also appears ready to throw a wrench into the opposition's impeachment motion, saying that the party's lawmakers will block the vote. Mr. Han, though, said that the party was not trying to defend the president's, quote, unconstitutional martial law. Mr. Yoon has been facing growing calls to step down. Reports say the impeachment vote will happen this Saturday. And for more analysis, let's speak with Aidan Foster Carter, his Senior Research Fellow in Sociology and Modern Career at Leeds University in England. Well, thanks so very much for joining us this hour, Aidan. So, first up, let's talk about South Korea's chaos right now. So many things happening. You know, prosecutors, they're investigating the Interior Minister, the former Defense Minister, barred from leaving the country. What is your take on all of this? I mean, did you see it escalating this far?
No, I mean, the whole thing is so extraordinary. May I quibble about chaos? There's political chaos, yes, because Yoon has done this extraordinary, crazy thing, and everybody's trying to work out how to undo it. Thank goodness, it didn't go through. There wasn't blood on the streets and so on. But meanwhile, life goes on. The stock market is there. People are on the streets, not just protesting. People are going about their daily business. And this is one of the things that really amazed everyone in the first place. This was not by, whether you're left or right, you like Yoon or not. This was not a situation of disorder. One could point to a number of countries in the world, I know, Georgia maybe, where there was any case at all where you could say that there was disorder such that you had to impose martial law. It's just that the opposition and the president really don't get on, and the opposition has a majority in parliament, and they were blocking him. So he did this crazy thing. Thank goodness no one was hurt. He rescinded it, and everybody is trying to work out what happens next, basically.
So we've still not heard from President Yoon, though. I mean, it seems like he's taken a while to publicly address the situation. I mean, maybe, coming out and at least just say sorry. And it appears that the longer he takes, the worse it looks for him.
I think his goose is cooked anyway, to be honest. And whether he says anything, I can't see. Even if I were him, I imagine that I can't see how anything I would say would improve the matter. I mean, people will just be incensed, I think, to even see him. And crucially, as you said in the introduction, his own party has disowned him. So I think he is now sidelined. I mean, it's possible. I had assumed he would just get impeached on Saturday, but if the ruling party is in fact going to hold firm, I wonder if they will. It only takes 8 members of the ruling party, who of course are a minority in parliament, to join the opposition, and then he is impeached, and it all goes through like that. But if they can find some other way, the parties would have to do some sort of a deal where he's sidelined as a figurehead, and say, what would he do? How can he represent the country abroad and so on? It is all very odd. We are in uncharted waters, but thankfully everyone is now, after that brief few hours of madness when the tanks were on the streets, everyone is actually discussing it, which is what they should have done in the first place.
So lots of wheeling and dealing happening now, behind closed doors. But could we touch a bit on this whole revenge politics impacting South Korea's democracy? I mean, do you see it as a sign of deeper issues within the system?
Yes, that is true. I mean, South Korea, people may be aware of the history. The country is, about less than 80 years old. And the first 4 decades, roughly speaking, were not very democratic. There was an authoritarian civilian, Syngman Rhee, then 2 military coups, Park Chung-hee, who was ruled for 2 years till he was shot across the dinner table by his own head of intelligence, and then another general, Chun Doo-hwan. Then there were protests. Since 1987, it has been democratic. It's robust, I think, in every sense. It has endured. The president rules for 5 years, no more, no less. And like clockwork, those elections have worked. Separate parliamentary elections, that's part of the problem. And I hear that behind the scenes they're discussing whether they could bring the presidential parliamentary elections into line. And that way you might get a consistent majority. So it hasn't been helpful. Yoon won by a whisker 2 years ago. He faced from the start an opposition majority. He didn't reach out to them. So unsurprisingly, the opposition increased their majority when they had elections last year. And if it maybe one should not generalize about cultures, particularly not one's own, but it does seem that people like to play hardball in South Korean politics. And, the tradition of, like in some European countries where there are always coalitions, you're always compromising, always doing deals. That's kind of not how it's been mostly in South Korea. And really, it will be helpful if there was a bit, a slightly more tolerant, yes, less revenge politics. And both sides play that game. They're both equally guilty of that.
So, based on how the government's handling of this crisis, how do you think that's going to change how the international community sees South Korea and its politics? And what are the implications for, I suppose, regional dynamics as well as alliances?
Very good question. And I have almost 2 opposite answers. Obviously, it's a terrible wobble. It's something out of the clear blue sky. When I got the first media phone call, having lunch was yesterday or the day before, the South Korean president has declared martial law. I thought, what? I thought probably something ruder than I could say on television. What the absolute, this is like Back to the Future. This is 40 years ago. I first visited South Korea in 1982 and it was under military rule, but just nobody was expecting that. However, they managed, this dreadful thing having happened, then, no shots were fired. Somebody fired a fire extinguisher. Thank God it was no worse than that. So the society, the polity, in another sense, has rallied round and has dealt with the mess of Yoon's making, I think, so far rather well. And that, I think, we can breathe a sigh of relief. But I guess we won't look at South Korea in quite the same way again. I mean, it's always a country to give us surprises, sometimes shocks, and here's one we certainly never expected. But I think stability, will be restored.
And also, Aidan, you're an expert on North Korea, and it's interesting that, North Korea has kind of stayed silent so far on this whole issue. What do you make of their silence? And do you think we should expect them to weigh in at some point?
I think that Kim Jong-un is, it's nice when North Korea isn't talking for a change, isn't it? They're normally breathing fire and, this and that. They're probably trying to work out what the hell is going on just as much as the rest of us have been. I wonder, I would expect in fullness of time, particularly if Yoon is impeached, then there will be some sort of diatribe against him and so on. But of course, they have to be careful. If they tell their people too much about what's happening in South Korea, North Koreans will grasp, if they don't know already, that South Koreans live in a rather different sort of country from theirs, not only a very much richer and freer one, but one where if you don't like the government, you get rid of it.
All right. Well, before I let you go, Aidan, I'm just curious to know what your thoughts on Yoon's fate by 2024. Do you think he could be impeached by the end of the year?
Yes, I mean, basically, we just have to wait for Saturday and we have to see whether, it just takes those 8 lawmakers of the ruling Conservative People Power Party to decide they've had enough of Yoon and to join the opposition, and then he is impeached. Because that starts its own thing. That's a procedure, not a fact. He steps down at that point, and the Prime Minister, Han Duck-soo, becomes acting president. But meanwhile, the Constitutional Court has to consider it, and they are 3 short of the 9 justices they're supposed to have. So more hurdles along the way. But yeah, if I were a betting person, which I'm not, terrible thing betting, but I think Yoon will be gone. But even if he's in office, he's toast. He's toast.
Right. All right. Actually, I like that wasn't the last question. We do have time for one more question. And I'm wondering this whole drama situation, right? Do you think it is a wake-up call for South Korean politics, the politicians as well as the public. How do you think this is going to shape the country's politics moving forward?
I do rather hope that it could go two ways. I mean, you could say that the Democratic Party, as they're called, they're the Liberals, the opposition that controls Parliament, they might well feel that hardball has been vindicated. They pushed and pushed and pushed at him so hard. I mean, the last thing was they rejected his budget and particularly slashed the funding for the presidential office and the prosecutors and various other people that they don't actually like. They might think, hooray, we should do more of that. But I rather hope that wiser counsellors will prevail, and the need for compromise, a different style of doing politics between the parties. I mean, I think that's very much what the South Korean public wants, but so far, not many politicians have seemed to want to give it to them. So that's very much what I'm hoping for, but we'll just have to see.
That's really some great analysis there, and also your prediction that Yoon will be out by the end of 2024. Really enjoyed that conversation. Aidan Foster Carter, Senior Research Fellow in Sociology and Modern Korea at Leeds University in England. Now, in other news, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell says that President Yoon badly misjudged his decision to declare martial law, and he called the move deeply problematic and illegitimate. He also said almost all U.S. diplomats in South Korea, including the White House, were deeply surprised by his move. Washington, though, later welcomed Mr. Yoon's decision to reverse the course of martial law, saying that it expects the dispute to be resolved peacefully, democratically, and constitutionally. The U.S. has been hailing South Korea's democratic resilience in the wake of the turmoil. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan called the country's democracy robust, adding that the White House will continue to support it and engage counterparts there.
For us, this is one of the most critical alliances that we have anywhere in the world. South Korean democracy is one of the most powerful stories anywhere in the world. It's very important that any disputes, differences, political differences be resolved peacefully and pursuant to the rule of law. That's what we're seeing now. That's what's so important to sustain.
And despite the unfolding crisis in South Korea, most tourists in the country appear unfazed. They've expressed little concern, citing the fact that martial law has been lifted.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried at night before flight, but when I arrived to the plane, the cabin crew who is working in Emirates, she said like there is nothing to worry. It's just like government stuff, and they make a little panic in social media. Then there is nothing to worry. It's just for government, and for tourists there is nothing to worry about.
So are you concerned at all?
Only a little bit, because our guide is also giving us security that nothing really big happened.
I would be concerned if the martial law had stayed in force, but it was instated but then rescinded within about 6 hours. So nothing too dramatic, I don't believe.
Well, with more coverage on South Korea's political upheaval and a closer look at the events that unfolded over the past 2 days on our website, do head to cna.asia. Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee has fired 2 members of his cabinet, getting the axe are Transport and Logistics Secretary Lam Sai-hong and Culture, Sports and Tourism Secretary Kevin Yung. Earlier this week, Mr. Lee, who is at the midpoint of his 5-year term, warned that if reforms are not carried out, Hong Kong's survival will be on the line. CNA's Mi Wong has a report.
In a hastily organized news conference just about an hour after news broke that he has sacked his transport and tourism ministers, Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee said he needed officials who will be able to help make his governance more effective.
We have lost time during COVID. We have lost time because of 2019 riots and black violence. So I have said many times, I want to recover the time. I want to chase back the results and time. All the team members now are able people who will be implementing my governance philosophies and aims, and are willing to take up challenges, make tough decisions, build the teams, and lead the officials to do what will be in alignment with my governance philosophy and aims.
Local media who learned about the sackings from Chinese state media Xinhua described the move as unexpected. Observers say the reshuffle reflects the urgency on the chief executive's part to show results, especially in tourism, a pillar industry that contributed around 5% of Hong Kong's GDP before the COVID-19 pandemic. The government last month revised down its 2024 economic growth forecast to 2.5% from its previous target of between 2.5% and 3.5%. This as Hong Kong struggles to revive visitor arrivals to pre-pandemic levels. Tourist arrivals are expected to fall short of the government's target of 46 million this year, which is already a much lower number when compared to the 55.9 million arrivals it received in 2019. Replacing Tourism Secretary Kevin Yeung is Rosanna Law, who was a former housing director, while newly appointed Transport Secretary Mabel Chan was formerly Permanent Secretary for Transport and Logistics. It's unclear at this stage whether more top officials will be replaced. In an interview earlier this week with public broadcaster RTHK, Mr. Lee said that Hong Kong is in a period of economic transformation, and with neighbouring competitors, including mainland cities, making rapid progress, Mr. Lee warned that without reform, this city could be eliminated. May Wong, CNA, Hong Kong.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, Taiwan President William Lai says the island will not bow to authoritarian regime in a pointed reference to mainland China. And UNESCO recognizes Japan's sake as part of the world's intangible heritage. Find out what's behind this new global honor. We turn to Malaysia, where a Royal Commission of Inquiry has proposed that a criminal investigation be launched against former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad over a decision to drop Malaysia's claim on outlying island Batu Putih, also known as Pedra Branca. In 2018, the government decided to withdraw its application to review the International Court of Justice's decision on the island's sovereignty. Dr. Mahathir, who led the government at that time, stands accused of deceiving the cabinet on the matter. In 2008, the ICJ ruled that Batu Putih belonged to Singapore, while Middle Rocks was awarded to Malaysia. Malaysia's parliament is due to debate the Royal Commission of Inquiry's report on the matter later. Well, CNA's Afifa Arifin with more on the main findings in the report of the Royal Commission of Inquiry.
Among the key findings of the report by the Royal Commission of Inquiry, the report proposals that a criminal investigation into former Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. It accuses him of deceiving the cabinet in 2018 by withdrawing Malaysia's review of the ICJ's decision on Batu Putih, or as we know, Pedra Branca. The commission found that Mahathir had unilaterally decided to drop the review without cabinet approval, only briefing them afterward on his decision. Now, the report suggests that had the cabinet been presented with the relevant documents, the cause papers, the written opinions of international negotiators, then it might have had a different opinion about the review bid. The commission claims that this had caused the government to suffer a wrongful loss and recommends a probe under Section 415B of the Penal Code, which covers cheating and deception. It also urged the RCI secretary to file a police report to initiate the investigation. But Dr. Mahathir, who has denied any wrongdoing previously, said the decision was made after extensive consultation in June. He also testified during RCI proceedings, which were conducted behind closed doors. Now, we are expecting a response from Dr. Mahathir soon.
China is warning the U.S. to, quote, stop sending the wrong signals after a phone call between U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Taiwan President William Lai. The call took place during the Taiwan leader's visit to Guam. It's his second stop in U.S. territory this week after Hawaii. Mr. Lai is on a tour of 3 Pacific Island nations it still has diplomatic ties with. Well, he met with Guam's leaders and delivered a speech in Parliament.
未来让我们继续携手努力，深化台湾和关岛的合作关系，成为印太第一岛链上面捍卫自由民主最关键的力量。
China has repeatedly condemned Mr. Lai's visit and America's support of it. The Chinese Foreign Ministry today said that Taiwan's separatist acts are dangerous to the peace and security across the Taiwan Strait and stressed on not giving Taipei the wrong signals. Japan has granted the Philippines more than $10 million to beef up its naval capabilities. The funds will go towards providing the Philippine Navy with rigid-hulled inflatable boats, coastal radar systems, as well as automatic identification systems. Japanese officials say that the package will contribute to maintaining and strengthening regional security and help enhance the security of vital sea lanes. This comes as the Philippines files a diplomatic protest against China, a day after Beijing and Manila traded accusations over another run-in, which took place near the disputed Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. A video of the incident shows the collision between Chinese and Philippine vessels, adding to a list of clashes between the two sides in the disputed waterway. Now, some headlines from media outlets in East Asia. Xinhua reports that a new batch of communication satellites has been successfully sent into an orbit around Earth following a noontime launch. They add to China's space sail constellation, an internet system designed to rival SpaceX's Starlink when complete. Well, Yonhap says the music video APT, which is a collaboration between Blackpink's Rose and Bruno Mars, has surpassed 500 million views and is the fastest K-pop video to do so, just 48 days into its release. And Kyodo reports London is set to host its first sumo, or Japanese wrestling event, in October next year. It will be more than 30 years since it last held one. Organizers are hoping the 4-day event will be more than just a sporting spectacle, but one that helps everybody grow closer together in this, quote, divided world. UNESCO raising a toast to Japan's sake, as the traditional techniques used to brew it were voted as one of the world's intangible heritage.
Salute.
Japanese representatives at the meeting in Paraguay marked the occasion by sipping the celebrated rice wine. Japan hopes the inclusion in UNESCO's intangible heritage list will boost new interest and consumption of the ancient beverage.
By being recognized internationally by this mechanism, that will renew the interests of the Japanese people, ordinary Japanese people in this area, and that could lead to the more momentum of transmitting these skills and know-hows to the next generations. And also internationally, we are very pleased to see the increased amount of sake exports abroad.
For the Japanese, sake is more than a drink. It's intertwined with rituals and celebrations, from purifying ceremonies to weddings. The drink is brewed in centuries-old mountaintop warehouses and savored in the country's pub-like izakayas. Once the drink of nobles, sake now pairs seamlessly with everything from sushi to Western dishes. Now, its global appeal is soaring, with exports surpassing $260 million last year, almost double of 2018 figures. Traditional brewers, however, have faced intense competition as consumers have acquired a taste for cocktails and other alcoholic beverages. It's also a moment of pride for Southeast Asia. UNESCO has adopted the kabaya onto its intangible cultural heritage list. The garment had been nominated in a joint bid by Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and Thailand.
It is therefore adopted.
The world body announced the result during an intergovernmental meeting in Paraguay. The kabaya is a traditional dress worn primarily by women in Southeast Asia. UNESCO developed the Intangible Cultural Heritage List back in 2008 to raise awareness of diverse cultural practices and safeguard the know-how behind them. Well, this marks Singapore's second element to make the list after its successful bid with hawker culture in 2020. Singapore's Culture, Community and Youth Minister Edwin Tong hailed the result as a proud moment for the nation and for Southeast Asia. He described the garment as more than just a piece of clothing, calling it a living tradition that embodies history, identity, and artistry. And on that note, we wrap up East Asia Tonight this Thursday. Your headlines, don't forget, anytime at cna.asia, and you can also look us up, Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for your company.